We're going to be talking about a debate that occurred between the eminent chemist, synthetic chemist Jim Tour, and an origin of life researcher by the name of Lee Cronin. Let's dig in now to Tour's opening talk, which included the challenge. There is sort of I'd say there's an accusation that the origin of life researchers have not been on the up and up with their results. Okay, that's clear. And I think that's a huge issue, right? That's an ethics issue. And then and here's why. Here are he says these 4 or 5 things that need to happen if you're going to make any kind of claims like this. So take us a little bit into Tour's challenge to the OOL researchers and why they're failing to sort of make advances here.
Certainly, and I'll give you a little bit more of a preface of what is really origin of life research. Because if you look at what origin of life researchers do, all the experiments can be summarized in most of it can be summarized in 3 different buckets. One is they take gases on the early Earth. They then will maybe apply a few other materials that were available, and they apply some energy source, like an electric charge, which would mimic lightning. Then what happens, they look at the results, and they say, aha, we've got amino acids. Aha, we've got some other molecule that's useful for life. But what Jim Tour has pointed out, and what other origin of life researchers have pointed out, like Stephen Benner, is what you have is every molecule useful for life, like an amino acid, is surrounded by many other molecules. And what happens is that's really where every origin of life theory fails. That's where it ends. Now, the next challenge, which Tour brought out, is, okay, let's just assume that you've got all the molecules you want in pure form in high concentrations, like all the amino acids you want. And the challenge is when you try to link them together in chains in the right way, because they have to have the right bonds, when you look at experiments like those performed by Lee Cronin, and that's one of the experiments that Jim Tour has brought out, is what you get is essentially junk. You have these amino acids that link together, but they often link together in the wrong way. In addition, what happens is they don't contain the right sequence, the right information to do anything useful. And another problem that Tour has pointed out and others have pointed out, if you were to, let's say, take the output of these experiments and you were to drop them in an ocean in the ancient Earth, or you put them in a little pool, what would happen is those molecules would simply break apart. So that's the challenge that Tour was presenting. And what he said is when you look at Lee Cronin's research, his earlier research attempted to look at the chemistry, but it all failed. He didn't produce anything useful. So now what's happened is Lee Cronin is looking at these more abstract mathematical models like assembly theory. And that's kind of the 3rd bucket of research. And when you look at that research, what happens is it's completely detached from the real world. It doesn't in any way model the real chemistry. So that's the point that Tour made, is that he made a prediction. He said, I predict when Lee Cronin gives you his talk, he will give you no solutions to the problems I've mentioned. He'll tell you nothing about how the chemistry could have moved a molecular system towards life. And he'll give you no knowledge of how life could have originated. And that's exactly what happened in the debate.
If I could add something else, there was also sort of a science communication criticism that Jim Tour levied. Brian did a great job explaining the science that the scientific challenges that Jim Tour posed. And this was alluded to earlier, I believe, that Jim Tour is really concerned that origin of life theorists are overstating what has been accomplished to the public. And so, for example, I think Owen mentioned that he talked about the fact that a very large percentage of the public believes that people have made frogs in the lab or have made life in the lab. And these are based upon surveys of people's beliefs about the origin of life. And so why does the public have these totally mistaken beliefs? Of course, that has never happened. Nobody has produced life in the lab. Nobody has shown how you can produce life under simulated natural early Earth conditions. And so why do people believe this? Well, Jim Tour gives quotes in many of his videos, and he did this a little bit at the roundtable, including one from Lee Cronin, of people saying that they have produced life in the lab. Or he has a quote from Lee Cronin back in 2011 saying that he's going to produce life in the lab within 2 years. Okay. So there's a reason why the public believes this. And it's because leading origin of life theorists are going around saying that people have produced life in the lab. And then you also look at the textbooks. The textbooks make these claims. In fact, sometimes Jim will show a large stack of textbooks that are promoting the sort of false view that say the primordial soup theory helped to solve the origin of life. Do you know where those textbooks come from? This is my wall of biology textbooks, you guys. And a while back, Jim contacted me and asked me to come up with a list of textbooks and take a picture of them for him, of textbooks that are basically making false claims about the primordial soup model and this idea that life emerged from this soupy mixture on the early Earth. And of course, this is now widely even disregarded by the origin of life community. But so I had a staff member and I, we went through a bunch of textbooks. We sent Jim a nice photo of a big stack of them. And these are literally the textbooks from my wall of biology textbooks here in my office. And so it's no wonder that the public has these false beliefs when they're being told by leading theorists and in the textbooks they're reading that the origin of life question has essentially been resolved. And so Jim's point really is that the origin of life theorist needs to tone down its rhetoric. The field as a whole needs to be very honest and open about the fact that they have not resolved these questions. To Lee Cronin's credit, although I do agree with many of the accusations that he was kind of shifty sometimes and trying to get you to believe the origin of life solution is within our grasp without actually providing anything remotely close to a solution. It was all about believe, just have faith, follow my charisma to the ends of the earth. But, you know, I think that nonetheless, at least he acknowledged during the roundtable that we don't have a solution. And I think that that is a true statement. And so one of Jim's best arguments he made during his opening statement, which by the way was 100% focused on the science. He didn't shout. He didn't get angry. He kept his cool and his calm. It was a great opening statement that Jim made during this roundtable. But Jim made this point that each advance that is made in the origin of life chemistry field, it may solve one small little problem. But meanwhile, our knowledge of the complexity of the cell keeps increasing at a much greater pace, meaning that the prospect of a solution to the origin of life is continually receding, as Jim puts it. So the problem keeps getting worse. As Tour said, he said, we learn a little bit about chemistry, we learn a lot about the cell, and the prospect of solving how the cell or the origin of life might have evolved and originated naturally just keeps getting further and further away from us the more that we discover. And I thought that was a very good framing that Jim put on the question.
And what you just said, Casey, is exactly why the book Icons of Evolution came to mind, which is the biology textbooks continue to use misleading information that favors a materialist philosophical outlook. And that's where I felt it was more like a apologist for materialism, Cronin was, than just a scientist. And so when he's going after Tour and saying, why are you being mean? It's like, I'm not sure it is mean. I didn't read him as being mean at all. Just saying you don't have any proof. Which is what a scientist should want. And then kind of just saying, well, we should be optimistic. You know, we want to be friendly to future studies. We don't want to shut down future studies. Well, but we want to know what the studies are and if they should be funded. And I thought that was why funding was important. And it was kind of funny to me, the amounts of money being thrown around, because I know at somewhere like Harvard, 50 million is nothing. But to the rest of us, 50 million, well, maybe, I don't know about you in California, 50 million in budget's nothing. In Arizona, that's still a lot of money.
Well, that line of
and so
rhetoric,
when someone says, well, what would you do with 50 million? As if you got to do something with it, versus, well, it was given by donors or taxpayers under false pretenses. They were told you're just about to make life, and if you just give another 50 million, you'll push us over the goalpost. And it's not true. And so the money may not be there to spend in the first place.
You know, let me just as a point of reference here, in Jim Tour's opening talk, he referenced Jack Szostak, who made a 2014 claim about how he was going to be able to create life in the lab, and then Cronin made a claim in 2011 about making life in the lab. So, I mean, there's a lot here, because you know, to add on to Owen's last point, I thought a lot of Cronin's rhetoric about what science is and how we do science and problems is having problems, is how we advance, you know, and having disagreements is how we advance. I thought that was a lot of just hand waving, to be honest, to get away from this more serious ethical charge, I think, or ethical accusation that Tour's making, that the public has been deceived in a sense.
That's a big deal.
And, you
And
know,
I-
I don't
and
know,
I think-
my father was an academic engineer for 40 years at the University of Notre Dame. I talked to him on occasion. He was department chair, and he talks about what people will do to get funding. I mean, you know, I'm just not, you know, I don't want to, you know, just say that I don't want to make any strong claim there, but I mean, I think we had to take into account that, you know, people are people, egos are at work here.
Well, we all
And-
talk about transparency with the government,
Yeah.
and I think we're hopefully transitioning to a time where we're going to have require transparency with universities also,
Yeah.
and how
Yeah,
they
I
spend their
think
money
so.
and the claims they
I
make
think there's
and what we actually get.